Hey, how's it going? Haven't shaved in a minute, but I figure I'm due for another rant. Haven't been playing Eve Echoes too terribly much, just moving things around, still tooling around on a little Thrasher too. I'm trying to reorganize around Istidard, but I had notes for an essay that I wanted to write. Not write, maybe talk through from a while back. And I glanced over them a little bit, but I'm gonna kind of freewheel it. Um, I was thinking about how many bodies did the first spaceship cost? Like the first, if you wanna call the first launch out through into the atmosphere, like one of the test runs that the Russians did, or whether it's Sputnik, or like Laika, or landing on the moon, like whatever milestone you choose to be stepping into space. Um, how many folks, how many people contributed to that throughout the years? Like, how big is the body count for the giants upon whose shoulders we allegedly stand on? And obviously, not the whole of humanity contributes to an individual endeavor, right? But there is a network. There is degrees of separation. I don't know if you guys have ever played. You guys, as if there's people out there. I don't know how common the game Seven Steps to Kevin Bacon is these days. When the internet was young and cats still roamed the pipes, Wikipedia was a toy. It was a place to go to explore the world. And there was this game where you would hit the random article button and you would have 7 steps. You had 7 links that you could click, and your goal was to try and make it back to Kevin Bacon. Nodal steps along a network. This sort of thing applies, to humanity at large as well. Like, as social networks grow more complicated and deep, there's fewer steps of removal between any two people on the planet. And conceptually, it's just one step, right? Human, easy. But actual interaction based, it's a lot more complicated. So, for the first spaceship, whatever that is, whatever you view it to be, there's the folks who did the programming and the building and the manufacture. There's the gathering of the materials that went into it. There's the technology itself, understanding and exploring that and turning that into a thing, making it real. There's the foundations upon which that technology is built, going all the way back to Pythagoras or Euclid or any of those big brain, old school thinkers back when the the diet schizophrenia that we call the inner monologue was brand new and viewed as a weird, strange concept. Thinking was a relatively new thing to some extent. There was the subconscious in a lot of ways, but the consciousness and the dialectic that leads to the emergence of that consciousness was still relatively fresh. And it showed up in other places, throughout the world. There's the mysticism and monomythic bleed that suggests a lot of cognitive structure and modes of thought. But not all of those are so many steps removed from just the strictly practical and applicable approaches to tech, right? So there's algebra and basic math and things like that. Sure, cool. That seems pretty straightforward and applicable to damn near everything. But there's also calculus and calculating the range under a curve not the range, but the volume of a curve. That's got some pretty significant space applications. Cool. Let's fill that in. So the folks who figured that out. The funny thing about history of math is a lot of it actually comes from bets. People made bets like, I bet you can't calculate the space under a curve, or you can't, figure out where this planet's going to be at that time. And like so was like, all right, fine, I bet you I can, and went off and freaking invented a whole field of math. And that happens like multiple times, oddly enough. But those bodies, throw them on the pile. Like, those lives lived, those experiences participated in detail, and the support structures that contribute to them, the loved ones, the people that were near at hand and contributed, not necessarily directly, like you can't say so-and-so's Newton's maid or Newton's, best friend. Like, I'm sure they contributed in some sense, but like, was the inspiration for the math or the tech or whatever you want to call a direct contribution to the science and the outcomes that were produced, was that any less significant than the individual themselves? Because like, ultimately, no man is an island, and we are less individually important so much as just nodes within a network. So, how many nodes? And if you play the tape again, like, assuming it'll all play the same way, how likely is it for an individual event, the moonshot, let's say, to occur? Like, I think it's 1-to-1. I think it's gonna occur the same way as if the movie is playing over. It's the longest movie in history kind of thing. But there's what's it called? There was an equation for the likelihood of, oh, hello, a ladybug. The likelihood for an alien civilization to occur. There you go. Oh, there it goes. Which, it's been a minute since I thought about that. Guess I've been more on Earth than out in space lately. Probably wasting time making this video, but it's fun to talk about these things. It'd be more fun to write about them. Get the poetry and the wordplay in, but I don't know if Eve Echoes is gonna ever have the volume of players needed to actually put into practice like most of the classes of ship. It really bugs me how individually focused design seems to be within the game. Players figure out ways to do things individually, and like, I'm guilty of this as well, putting those small ships into use and figuring out like the extremes of what they can get away with, and how a free-to-play player can be competitive with whales and folks who spend a lot of money to get a lot of benefit, and as a result end up avoiding the gameplay, which allows the niches to open up at the extremes. And that the midpoint, that Tech 5, Tech 6, Tech 4, around there, that's the sweet spot where the normal curve overlaps with the Pareto distribution going towards paid, and overlaps with the normal curve overlaps with the Pareto distribution going towards time available. Like, that's where the best bang for your buck is as a player, because you're competing with individual bots and you're competing with individual credit card warriors. You're just a node within a network, and those niches that exist, if they're driven to extinction, like, the game kind of ceases to be a game so much as... I mean, it's still a game. It's just not one that is actually participated in. It's actually played. I think the sweet spot for number of players in any given experience is about 7 plus or minus 2, from like a human factors perspective. I talk a lot about that in Mimetic Organization, but that's unpublished just yet. I need to finish the last few chapters on that before I kick it out the door. This feels more like talking to myself than talking to others. No wonder content creators didn't stick around with Eve Echoes. Most of the game is designed away. People don't... There's nanocores for stabbers and the like, but nanocores for destroyers, which are like the backbone of any navy, are non-existent. The best I could find for my little Thrasher 2 is a tungsten age. And that's supposed to be like a tunnel rat. Like, it's supposed to just go into condensed spaces, snoop around for a bit, maybe nibble on some of the rocks with the lone mining laser it has. But it's prowling for, hunting for other explorers. But folks don't really play. They're too busy. Good on them. I'm glad they're busy. Or whatever. I think the whole of humanity is behind any individual event, to some extent. Like, genetically speaking, there's more variation between two penguins on the same Antarctic shelf, more variation within that species than there is between humans. You take a person from one side of the globe and a person from the other side of the globe, and genetically they're not so distinct. But folks don't view races as species or things like that. They think of races as ethnicities, which is really silly, because, like, if it can make babies with itself, it's the same species, it's the same race. And yeah, the more people mix, the more apparent and obvious it becomes that, like, delineations based on appearances are silly. I'm learning more about my sweet Savage, my partner, about what she's got going on, genetically speaking, and it's interesting how someone can have such a different experience of existence, so much variation in qualia, and I wish I could think of a good example for this, but phenomenology has kind of been at the forefront of my mind lately. And the phenomenology of each of those contributing members within the species towards reaching the stars is something magical, something fascinating, truly amazing and astounding. Like the ancient Chinese, who figured out fireworks and gunpowder well before anyone else on the planet. And their first instinct was to use it for celebration and not for war, but to, signify really cool stuff happening. It wasn't until well after that smokeless powder and the development of guns was a thing. Or those ancient Chinese who sailed the world. I can't remember the name of the leader of that expedition, but went out, found out, okay, yeah, we're in the lead, and then just maintained it. They just went back and they didn't try and they didn't really have the infrastructure to get all colonial and stuff, but they did that in other ways, and later on down the line, the failure of imagination that leads people to develop a perception that others are tools instead of a respect for tools as extensions of the self or as extensions of others. Like, ultimately, that's the punchline for phenomenology, is that whole alien phenomenology, that respect and love for objects and for nature and existence, not just for consciousness such as it is. Because, like, most other species, as far as I can tell, based on like not a lot of research, but based on exposure, have a different sort of consciousness. The language of birds, for example, doesn't come with an internal translator. There's no words necessary. They just get signal and response, and not necessarily China room levels of translation and if that translation is competency or not, but like the substance of consciousness, the internal thoughts that carry on through individuals, whether it's memes or phrases, like the numerous words that Shakespeare invented, or whether it's modes of presentation for those phrases, considering the word Yosemite, for example, and not reading that as Yosemite, which, charming. Or hammock, or hammock, as I've heard it pronounced in the wild. Or like when folks read something and pronounce it one way when it's normally pronounced a different way. Like that sort of translation error, or I don't know if it can even be called an error if there's no ethic to it, if there's no intention or goal beyond the communication itself. So long as the object, the experience, is communicated, it doesn't really matter how it's communicated, right? Like, if I were to say apple, someone would potentially recognize the fruit itself, whether they have the image conjured for the fruit itself within their mind, which is a strange way of thinking about thinking. But more than that, every individual body that contributed to the event, the moon landing, whatever, they each had their own phenomenological experience. And the objects that they interacted with throughout each had their own phenomenological experience, though unconscious. I don't think I'm going to keep up with the daily videos thing. I thought I could pull it off, by doing a whole bunch of little ones. But honestly, this is why I write. It's easier to pile up the thoughts into something seemingly significant or useful than it is to just to rant at a screen for a bit. So maybe this is me taking a break for a minute. I'm still going to do the Tuesdays, Taco Tuesdays, and keep chugging along and recording the readings from Orion's belts, but the more I do that, the more I recognize that a lot of the tutorial stuff, a lot of the instructional, like flight training, potentially, it's buried in so much philosophical whinging and hemming and hawing that there really isn't an audience for it. It's a strange sort of poem more than a book. I don't know. I need more hobbies. I want to get back into painting. I want to get into sewing stuff, making things. I want to actually find something that'll pay the bills, because, like, not being able to pay rent sucks and is terrifying. But it doesn't suck nearly as bad as wage slavery, or the abnegation of self, and the objectification of inherent humanity that occurs with that becoming a cog within the machine, or becoming outsourced to AI, as a lot of IT has been, and it's certainly a lot better than killing people. It's sad and frustrating that most of my project management experience went towards those goals, drone operations, and like turning stuff into component parts. I want to build things that make people happy. I want to make games that people can play, or books that people can read and enjoy. I'm really tired of not tired of, because I guess I haven't been pigeonholed in that arena in a while, but like the profits that come from military applications are really just vibes based. There's nothing productive that comes from blowing people up or building weapons. And there's nothing really profitable from exploration of space until we figure out how to terraform our own home. Like, billionaires are looking to the stars as if it's an escape, not recognizing that they're going to take their own bullshit with them. Unless we're able to fix Earth, as if you could fix a planet, until we're able to better accommodate ourselves and our environments to desired ethics, not necessarily outcomes, but ethics, the forever game that Simon Sinek speaks of. It doesn't really matter how many bodies pile up or how many moonshots we get. Everything is dependent on and contingent upon the fundamental experience of interaction and language. And I've said in other videos, games are language. But language can be, interpreted as a game in its own right. Wordplay and the like, communication. All of it comes down to signal and response. Within Eve Echoes, it's very easy to illustrate. It's a sandbox, right? You can point and say, all right, I see this object. I react to it in this way. I exploit it in that way. I find these resources and I can use them for this, that, or the other product. All of that to say, I want to go interact with a shaving razor and take a shower and not necessarily start my day, because it's already been a really good day, but continue it. Living art is more important than dead art. And the books that I produce, the words that I write, those will never pay the bills. I've got to figure out ways to find experiences that are enjoyable and fulfilling. Maybe even enough to sustain this stupid life that I am captain of. In the Invictus sense, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to bowl, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul. That mentality and that belief, such as it is, has a few holes poked in it recently through fields of cognitive neuroscience. And there's a lot to wonder about when it comes to the belief in free will. And the piles and piles of bodies that contribute to individual events, each believing that they have free will, but the outcome potentially being the same. Like, so for Earth, grand filters, one of those things, what was the equation? I can't remember it. I'll have to go watch some Isaac Arthur, and because he talks about it a lot. Grand filters. What are the odds that this planet would have an extinction event that created fossil fuels? Slim to none. Slim to none that the planet would create life in the first place, let alone have that life get dashed well enough that birds didn't develop language to the point that their society reached the stars before ours. Or even that birds were a thing. Dinosaurs, dinosaur chicken nuggets are a bit of a tautology, is all I'm saying. But the odds of those things occurring, the contribution of those external forces atop the pile of bodies that led to an individual event. It's a lot to think about. It's pretty rad to just, consider. I don't know if free will is so much of a thing as an illusion, but you gotta believe in it. You gotta believe in free will. You ain't got a choice. I don't even know if I'm gonna upload this, if I should. It really is just a useless rant. But I guess no more useless than the others. Maybe it's worth a laugh. Anyway, I'm gonna go eat something. Have a good day. Whoever you are, wherever you are, if you're actually out there watching. Hopefully things are going well for you.